The best way to describe this game is like buying a ton of fast food, but you were the person fit with the bill. Like, there's 6 people in your car, and you ended up spending like $50 on fast food, and you know it's bad for you, you know it's way overpriced, and is it worth what they're charging, but for some reason you keep coming back to this restaurant. This game somehow manages to encapsulate that. It's junk food. It's delicious, gourmet, only in Japan junk food, and there's something about it that it does phenomenally well. It takes the fan service, cranks it up to a solid 10, gets players in the doors with this sex appeal aspect, and then it surprises them with a huge flourish-based music tempo kind of combat system that lets you get addicted to slashing through these hordes of zombies to an upbeat, kick-ass soundtrack. Japan's gonna do what Japan's gonna do. You can't stop them when it comes to wild, weird ideas like this. Oneechanbara Origins is the latest release in the Oneechanbara saga, a zombie action hack-and-slash adventure series that spans all the way back to the simple 2000 series for the PlayStation 2. It's seen a number of sequels and ports throughout these years, all with varying takes on the evolution of their surprisingly fun sword and brawler-based combat mechanics. But you don't need to play any of those games in order to jump into Origins. It's a refreshing retelling of the first and second game stories, compacted into one roughly 4 to 5 hour campaign. For context of my review, I purchased Origins on the PlayStation 4 system for $59.99 on release October 14th, and I threw in an extra $19.99 for the Season Pass about 2 days after that. For the story missions.
Yes!
We will get into my major issues with the DLC content for this game later in the video, but for now, let's stay on track. I played through the game on hard for the first experience, and have completed it 3 times after that on varying difficulties like normal and beast. I've also completed up to 100 floors in the survival challenge tower to make up for the fact that buying the season pass instantly unlocks the third playable character Lei, who can only be unlocked if you complete 100 floors, so I wanted to make up for that. Also, Lei is referred to as Rei by the characters in-game, but I'm just going to pronounce it Lei because that's how it's spelled.
I'm Saki. I'm completely useless and really annoying. Teehee.
I'm primarily making this review for individuals like myself, people who are a little bit more susceptible to the charms of fan service titles like this and need more context and information before buying, especially at full retail price. Fanservice games can often wear out their welcome very quickly if the sole purpose is to tantalize the player with sex appeal and more base motivators. But in the unique case of Oneechanbara, I think the sex appeal is used more as a differential seasoning to get people in the door, and shows its chops as a competent hack and slasher with a combat system that works in favor of less locomotive enemy types like zombies. This video will be split into chapters. You're currently in the introduction still. We'll be moving into gameplay, story, sound design, replay value, and a hopefully short rant about the atrocious DLC implementation that's shoved into this game. But without further ado, let's get started with the gameplay. Moment-to-moment gameplay in Origins is about destroying all enemies in an area before moving to the next section. Environments are relatively bland arenas with next to no detail outside of a few unique instances, but the emphasis and focus seems to have been shifted more towards the mindless dismemberment and eradication of all zombie threats. So how do you make a game about killing the shamblers with a samurai sword interesting? Well, you turn it into a stylish dance of death. Oneechanbara Origins, much like its previous title, Oneechanbara Z2 Chaos, makes use of a combo amplification system referred to as cool combos. I swear they could have had a better name for it. They could have spent a little bit more time to come up with a better name than cool combos, but here we are. Timing your inputs to the animation of your character allows you to maximize not only strike combination length, but the damage output overall. Once you land strikes with cool finishers and you get that tempo going, you can't really ever go back to button mashing. It just doesn't feel right. And that's one of the things I actually liked about this game. Origins could have easily dumbed down its combat system and substantially killed any remote interest their combat might have had. But the use of the cool combo system in tandem with blade blood management makes combat feel way more flamboyant, like a display of flourish and mastery over the character's weapons, rather than an efficient, straightforward genocide of the zombies in the AO. This feels like it suits the world that these characters live in, too. Our protagonist Aya, for instance, has lived in a world of zombies her entire life, and it makes sense that she's honed her skills to a fine edge. Standard zombies are no longer a challenge for her, and the fluid dance she performs when weaving between, underneath, and over predictable zombie attacks that she sees every day is a challenge for the player to emulate. Traditional hack and slashers like this find their fun factor in combat, but unlike games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, Oneechanbara isn't very strict on how effectively the player needs to perform. The scoring system is extremely lenient, handing out max V ranks for players that even know the basics of a combat game, and no rewards or incentive are given to players who choose to better understand the systems. I feel like while the standard gameplay is made well enough that I can run through 100 floors of the survival tower and still be ready to go for another 100, I wish that the game did more to push players to better themselves rather than find the most effective tactic and stick to it. Other game mechanics include keeping your blade clean through tactical reloads, as the game dubs them. After using a weapon for an extended period of time, blood will accumulate on the weapon in question and require an input to remove the blade with a stylish flick. This flick always serves as an awesome period on the end of a bloodbath as you clean the blade after a long combo string, but it can also be used in combat to chain together maneuvers or even tactically reposition yourself towards or away from a preferred opponent. Each of the 3 characters in the game all carry 2 weapon types, and the player can switch between them at any time mid-combat to vary up their style, but it's strictly for style. It's not at all mandatory. On the subject of blood accumulation, certain characters of the baneful bloodline need to stay wary about the amount of blood splatters on them during combat. As each drop of blood increases, sisters Aya and Saki will become consumed by their baneful blood true nature and fly into a berserk form that renders them more powerful and bloodthirsty. Canonically, this isn't a desired effect, as its lasting repercussions with extended use are not good, but from a gameplay perspective, there's literally no incentive to not cover yourself in blood. Berserk mode is akin to Super Saiyan or Golden Sonic forms. Power gets amplified, movement is faster, outfits get sexier, and all the enemy types can be killed more easily. I wish there was a legit reason for managing this mode rather than it just happening passively when you get a little too kill crazy. But players can even vampire leech when in the 3rd form of Berserk, which helped me out plenty on the higher floors of the survival tower.
My name is Aya. I need more blood. Blah 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 bitty blah.
This game also features a parry and dodge mechanic that become crucial to late game survival. Parry is really only used and required for one enemy type, and that's the Mudmen, enemies who appear about a quarter of the way through the campaign and can only be killed with a perfectly timed parry. These enemy types are known to heavily slow down the flow of combat and require the full attention when on the field. They can be easily dismantled though when you're in Berserk form. Dodging, on the other hand, is an extremely useful tool, not only for the obvious avoiding of attacks in stylish slow motion, but for the important factor of building meter, which can be used for special attacks. This is just above your health bar. Special attacks are flashy ultimates that vary depending on your chosen character and weapon, and each have their own uses depending on the situation. For instance, Aya's single blade katana special can absolutely room clear with its 180 arc, while Saki's ult can stagger stun enemies more easily and set up EX kills. These EX kills are specific input strikes that will either grapple or initiate an EX based attack based on the character, and they cost no meter. As the game progresses, you'll eventually get to control 2 characters at a time, and the gameplay really opens up here in terms of efficiency and flourish, as you and your partner can interchange mid-combo to vary up attack types, extend combo strings, and capitalize on stunned opponents more easily. When you've gotten into the flow of it and the music's pumping behind you, you really get to see what Oneechanbara is about at its core, and it's the feeling of flowing in between enemies, slicing as you go, and avoiding damage perfectly. It feels great, and it's one of the best things this game has going for it. But despite all of that excitement, I truly wish there was more going for Oneechanbara. More ways to vary up why the player should perform better, and ways to diversify the enemy types more often. More ways to replay through the maps, reverse the maps, change them up, randomize, put late game enemies earlier in the game, change up a difficulty mode, make it actually difficult and challenging. There is a leveling system in place for each character, but it's so bare bones it might as well have not been there at all. I think I had the most fun with this game's challenge factor when I was a level 3 Aya going up against the first boss in the game. This is a parry tutorial of sorts, but even so, 16 hours into the game, this first boss is still the most intimidating boss in the game. Everyone after him is a pushover, but I enjoyed retrying, learning the timing, and trying to maximize damage on his missed swings or failed strikes while trying to avoid hordes of zombies. He had moves I had to adapt to, and a variety of ways to counter me, and I enjoyed it. Once my character leveled up too high, there was little to no problem in the way of threats. I cleared every stage and defeated every boss without even the need to retry, and this disappointed me. Outside of the challenge tower, which is more a battle of inventory management rather than skill, there isn't much to be found here. Unless I do a clean save and I start on like beast mode or something, but even then, the game would force me to level up. There's no way to skip that process. But again, I suppose this is just a personal gripe. Boss designs for this game, surprisingly, are one of its best features, and I wasn't expecting that. Each boss in the game, save a certain Hanzo lookalike, are quite unique and interesting. Some bosses are recycled a little too much for my liking, but they all require knowledge of the dodge and parry system and the EX system in order to complete them quickly. I enjoyed fighting Lei for the first time and avoiding her SMG fire swipes in slow motion and getting the tempo for her attacks. They have like a metronome-like rhythm to them that encourages adaptation. Father Oboro has a similar system, but once you figure out his timing, it's just a joke. And the game reuses his boss way too often, even in the DLC, which I'll talk about later. Despite that though, there are some really fun battles to be had. But if I'm being honest, it isn't anywhere near $60 of fun. I mean, you can genuinely enjoy something, but still know that it isn't worth what you paid for. And I know that deep down, I could have valued the entertainment this game had to offer way more if it was like 20 to 30 bucks. But as it stands gameplay wise, this has to be one of the cleaner entries in the Oneechanbara series, and the graphical change it's received to a more cel-shaded comic style does wonders for the characters. And speaking of, I think it's time we talked about the super deep, life-changing narrative that is Oneechanbara's plot. Oneechanbara Origins follows the tale of the baneful blood sisters Aya and Saki, daughters of their father, Oboro. Their lineage plays a large role in the plot, as they're heirs to a unique and powerful bloodline that prides itself on traditions of ritualistic combat between its heirs.
You bitch! I wish you never existed!
Themes of competitive sisterhood are central in this game, as are themes of love, protection of the weak, and obsession for power. But you wouldn't notice or immediately suspect that from a game where the main character stone-faced has a conversation with her father while clad in a bikini, cowboy hat, and if I may say so myself, a somewhat tacky neckpiece.
What
I mean, it's not like anybody else dresses like this.
Shut it.
The campaign takes place over a matter of days as Aya sets out after her sister Saki, who's left a mysteriously threatening voicemail on her depressed bunny phone. This leads Aya on a quest to search for her sister with the help of a mysterious new acquaintance named Lei. And with that, the stage is set for this zombie romping road trip through this unnamed city. And while heavy themes contradict a rather silly cast, it is entertaining to see the life brought to these characters by some of the voice actors. I know this delves more into sound design, but I wanted to briefly touch on how these characters are portrayed. Delivery of lines and dialogue is extremely dry in English.
Not sure. Maybe Saki wants to bring her back to life.
And I was really confused as to why some of these actors were chosen. But later in the game, I could see that the ability to scream, shout, and deliver hilarious lines were a necessary prerequisite.
I'm going to be the one to wash it all away!
Damn it all to hell! Damn you!
You.
Sissy, that's her! She's the one! That's Aya!
Yes, I know.
It's over now!
Fine.
When it comes to characters and what they offer in terms of gameplay, Aya serves the role of a stoic protector. She has a ton of love for her sister Saki and shows a unique strength unfamiliar to her entire baneful blood lineage, which is her ability to remain clear-headed even while in berserk form. Aya's ability to rapidly cut through enemies in her gameplay is her strength, and she moves through enemies with an elegance and precision unrivaled by other characters. Saki, on the other hand, is much more hot-headed and more gullible in the wake of her mother's passing. She also displays a lot more emotion in the way of curse words when she's pissed. Her annoyed exchanges with Lei, sort of third-wheeling her adventure with Aya, have to be some of my favorite interactions in this game, and I really love the dynamic those two have with each other.
It's really great to have you with us, Ray. But you could have at least contacted me.
Hey, I was tied up.
That's a lot
Meetings
of blood.
and stuff, you know.
But don't you work alone?
Well, yeah, but I needed to make arrangements to ensure a steady stream of supplies, and look, I had my hands full, all right?
Talk about vague excuses.
I'm Saki, I'm completely useless and really annoying. Teehee.
I also want to quickly say that Saki's character design has received an amazing facelift with the use of the new art direction. In older titles, she came off as very generic and bland, but she is really brought to life with this new vibrant color scheme, stronger contrast, and an easier to read facial expression. This applies across the board as well. Aya and Lei's characters models, as well as the supporting cast, are all just great to look at, and they really benefit from this transition in artistic cel-shaded style. Lei is the final playable character and has to be my favorite. She's got a duality to her that walks the line between insecurity and suspicious bursts of cockiness. She's difficult to read at first and has more of her story fleshed out in the DLC, but not by much. I haven't had a chance to talk about her style of gameplay yet either, so I'll quickly do that here. With her primary weapon being a dagger with airtight combo timing precision, her secondary weapon and her signature firearm weaponry all complement her gameplay style. The weapons are brought out in accordance to their respective combo inputs, so she can use dual pistols, submachine guns, assault rifles, and even a freaking beam cannon. And the two weapon forms feed into each other quite nicely. Character animations say a lot about a character in this game, and quite a bit of personality can be derived in the way that they execute commands, even remain idle, and initiate their walk cycles.
Oh yeah, I'm getting my groove on. Oh, who says groove anymore? Not me.
Not me.
For instance, Aya's control of her blades is pinpoint, precise, and every movement is measured. She returns back to her starting position with confidence, and it feels like she really knows her way around the blade. Saki, wielding the Odachi, she swings wildly, heavy, and it feels like without her baneful blood, she wouldn't be able to pick up that weapon and use it as easily. So it feels like she's really taking advantage of her natural gifts and using them to the maximum efficiency. Lei, she strikes with flourish, she spins, she twirls, and she returns to her default military-like position with ease, and these animations flow with surprising grace. It was actually a really cool thing to notice. Attention to detail was made in these departments, and I can appreciate it. The bombastic portrayal of violence in this game is the main factor, but it's also nice to see that all the animation was given so much attention. The story of the game overall isn't breaking any new ground, and it took me about 2 playthroughs to really understand what was going on. But I did appreciate how subsequent playthroughs gave more weight to specific character interactions by how they were saying things. It gave me a new context on the second playthrough, and I was like, okay, alright, I see why she was acting this way in this scene. Now I know I've already spoiled a lot, but I don't want to get into much more of the story. It's serviceable, it complements the adventure well enough, and it introduces players to the worlds of Oneechanbara in a very easy to digest manner. The sound design in Origins is a bit of a mixed bag, and I want to start with the bad first. On one hand, voice acting was very hit or miss. Lip syncing issues for English voice actors in particular were constantly delayed and caused long pauses in dialogue during cutscenes. This would take me out of the moment, and line delivery was very dry for a majority of the game.
They're wearing black clothes. Their hair is white. Ray, is this funny to you?
How did that screw up happen, I wonder? I really wish I could have seen it.
You're interested in seeing the dead bodies
Very
of women.
interested.
Sicko.
While I personally think this added to a level of camp for the experience, I think the average player won't appreciate this lack of enthusiasm. Seriously though, in terms of audio mixing for the music department, it was also really weird there. Music can sound really quiet one scene and very loud in the next, and I think this had to do with the fact that each individual song in the game was being sent by their respective performers, and audio files might have been formatted in various outputs. This led me to just look up the in-game songs for myself and play them alongside the game. On the subject of music, however, I do want to lead to some of the good points. This game has introduced me to composers and genres of music that I can't even pronounce. There's a sort of hyper-vocalist music genre that I didn't know I needed until I played this game. This music is what complements the combat sound effects so perfectly too, and I can honestly say that the combat in this game would not feel nearly as complete without the accompanying slashes, gushes of blood, battle cries, and the rushing sounds of the combo string effects. When your blade cuts through 12 enemies lined up and you hear the sound of that meat being slashed multiplied by 12, it becomes an addiction to want to hear that sound again. It's what kept me going through the 100 floors of the combat tower. The swooshing of wind as you just barely dodge an attack, and the steel cling as you perfectly parry an enemy and send them flying backwards, they all contribute to the chaotic rock-fueled circus that is late-game combat encounters.
I'm fly, I'm the female boss, I'm number one. Number one in town, that's how it's going.
Oneechanbara is meant to be played through multiple times. The campaign can usually be beaten in one sitting, and there are a number of unlockable rings that can be purchased from the shop. I forgot to mention the shop. There's a shop, and it sells rings. It's honestly one of the saddest shop systems I've ever seen put into a game, and there's no excuse why it's this pathetic. The game makes a statement regarding to how it feels about unlockable content pretty early on, and it says the only content you can look forward to is fucking concept art, bitch. And that's about it. Oh, and there's music you can unlock, but I'll admit it's kind of worth it. The music is worth it. But it's also a cop-out, because they lock some of the best songs behind a DLC paywall, but I'll save that rant for later. So back on track, the shop sells recovery items, damage amplifiers, bloodstain removers, bloodstain adders. It also sells various rings that can change your character's attributes and unique settings like damage output and their ability to dodge more effectively, how often they have to clean their blade, item pickup percentage, chances, etc. It's boring stuff. Like, this could have been used for so much more. You know what? Screw it. We're fusing the rant section and the replayability section in this one. This shop could have been used for so much more. It could have been used to get new outfits, not outfits that are locked behind a friggin' paywall. I literally thought these quests that I saw at the title screen had unlockable outfits behind them, but it turns out that model sheet is just a fancy word for that. Model sheet. Apparently it means concept art. You could have incentivized players to rerun the game in so many different ways to unlock sexier outfits, weapon variants, headgear, or even funnier outfits that'll make the cutscenes look even more ridiculous than they already are. For instance, add a speedrunning mode and challenge players to make builds for specific speed efficiency over other tactics, or a one life arcade mode that makes battles more intense and limits the person's ability to heal at specific statue shrines sprinkled throughout the campaign. That would have made it way more intense. Or a mode where you just multiply the hell out of the enemies so the halls are just filled with undead, and it's more like a Dynasty Warriors game where every time you swing your sword you're going through at least 12 zombies and just hearing the blood splatter everywhere. It would have been great. But no. As it stands right now, Oneechanbara only has a Beast and Berserk difficulty after hard, and that's it. Berserk mode allows you to stay in Super Saiyan form the entire playthrough, and that's the exact opposite of what I personally wanted. And Beast mode, it's just glorified hard mode. If you've already got a maxed out character, there's not going to be any challenge here. The Survival Tower is the only mode that has any really good incentive to play it, and that was to unlock Lei. But to get to floor 100, you need maxed out characters for Aya and Saki both. Speaking of, this game needed one or two more characters in my opinion. The Seductress Eva's character model is already in game and even has a Baneful Blood Berserk mode and a fully set list of attacks. I would have loved to play as that crazy babe. But outside of survival mode, the rest of the content is locked behind a DLC paywall. And I absolutely hate that they had the audacity to include a bonus mission tab for a singular mode, survival. Survival Tower doesn't even have enough depth to, let's say, a challenge mode like Resident Evil's Mercenaries mode, so I don't get why it needs its whole own section. That's just a tease for people who don't have the extra content, and this leads people like me to 2 days later buy the Battle Pass. And look, I get it. It's good business and it worked, but I played these half-assed, undercooked, reused asset heaven-ass bonus missions so no one else who sees this video ever has to buy them. So let's go through all the bonus missions that they've added, starting with bonus mission 1. Aya enters a flashback where she reflects on her training with her dad. Put simply, you fight her dad again, for like the 3rd time in this game in an environment you've already been to. This will be the 5th time you fight your dad if you did the Survival Tower before purchasing this content. He goes down easy, just like he always does, because his boss fight is a joke, and then you move on to mission 2. Well, I might as well wear the DLC outfits. I haven't been using the DLC outfits, so let's use them for this DLC mission. And I'll try out these stupid little weapon option things here. There's only one weapon option. I thought there was going to be more, but this game came out in Japan like a year ago, so if they're going to add any new content, this is probably all there was. So let's just try these stupid things out. Okay, mission 2. It's the exact same thing as mission 1. Oboro summons some zombies to fight Aya as a warm-up. Is that my sword making that noise? Okay, so the weapon variant gives your weapon sound effects for every strike and action that your weapons input. Okay. Back to the mission. Training with Daddy goes bad, and when Papa Oboro loses himself to the Baneful Blood, he tries to go all out on a level 99 Saki. This leads to the exact same fight as before. He does the same moves, except maybe he teleport attacks a little bit more. I don't know, I beat him so quickly these days, I don't know if he has any extra moves that I haven't seen. He goes down easy. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a bit of a quiz. What do you think, based on the history of this DLC, what do you think this next fight is going to be? What do you think your hypothetical 399 got you? Because we're about a quarter of the way through all the bonus missions now. What do you think you got? That's right. If you guessed another date with Papa, you are now the proud owner of yet another recycled game asset.
Please,
That's
no,
right. Come
no,
on down. One more
no.
fight with old Daddy Dearest.
No.
It's got a fitting name at least. Let's put on one of these silly weapon skins and see what it changes. Okay, so another fight with Father. Only this time we're fighting a mental projection of him. And we're going to be playing as Saki. Okay. And it looks like this weapon skin just moans a lot when I get hit. The mission ultimately results in Saki realizing that she isn't strong enough to exact revenge on her father for having slept with another woman other than her mother. And the campaign already explained that Eva pours poison into Saki's ear, and gets her to turn against her family. This DLC does nothing to extrapolate on that information, except talk about how strong she is. It's just a day in the life of what evil Saki's like. And the mission after that, it's a similar situation with Saki creating a mental projection of Aya. I'm not even going to bother covering that one. Okay, here we go. Lei's missions. Lei DLC's missions are probably the only ones where any new information is brought to light. We get insight on Lei's origins as well as the source of her insecurities, how she was brought up through an extreme training regimen of experiments and trials that forced her to become the strongest of her kind. She couldn't afford to make connections with her quote-unquote sisters, as this would only make it more difficult when she had to inevitably kill them. Through these procedural trials, Lei began to crack, and in the end, had a terrifying confidence in herself. But what it costs her is the connection with a sister she would one day try to find again in Aya, to an obsessive level. The maps here are sadly recycled from the survival mission, but the story here gives a legitimate background and information that recontextualizes the main campaign in a good way. I only wish that this had come with the base game free. Look, I won't say there isn't more context to be gained regarding the game's plot by playing these missions in full, but the 15 seconds of dialogue you get from these missions are what you're literally being charged for, not the gameplay, because the gameplay is what you already paid for when you bought the game. I just can't get right with the idea that they scooped this content out for no reason at all when it adds to the full understanding and motivators of some of these central characters. Why am I getting upset about a plot in a game like this? Why do I care about this? Okay, in closing, Oneechanbara, despite its flaws, comes at players with a hilarious confidence in what it is. There are moments in this game where you can tell the developers were just having a blast. And like I mentioned earlier, it's junk food. When you compare the full retail price of what this game is versus some of the games we have coming out this same year at the same price, it just isn't logical to buy this game at $60. I personally enjoyed Oneechanbara Origins, but I would never recommend this game to someone who isn't very familiar with the series. And if they were familiar with the series, I wouldn't recommend it for anything over $30. The DLC implementation is a joke that I feel legitimately regret when I think back on purchasing it.
What have I done?
But the base game is fun. Zombie slashing romp through relatively bland environments with an amazing soundtrack. What Oneechanbara believes it is versus what Oneechanbara actually is amazes me. And it's the confidence in how hyped it is for itself that makes me keep coming back to it. If there is another Oneechanbara, I really can't wait to see what improvements they make on the series, because I think this remake debut is actually pretty good for what this game's concept is. But until then, I'll see you in the next one, and thanks for watching.
Here we go.